Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and today I'm going to finally share with you my spoilery thoughts on The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. If you have not yet read this book, this might not be the video for you since it will be filled with spoilers. However, I have already done a spoiler-free review of The Dragon Republic, which I will leave linked up there and down below, so you can watch that instead. And now with that said, let's move into my thoughts. I have to say I'm really struggling trying to find things to say that are positive that I have not yet already talked about in my spoiler-free review. And that is of course because I gave this book only 2 stars. So I do have some positive things to say about it, but most of those are kind of also then connected to some more negative things that I want to say, and those negative things a lot of times outweigh the positive things about said thing. And I just said thing a lot. But the one positive thing that I can definitely say that I already mentioned in my spoiler-free review is the way R.F. Kuang dealt with Rin's trauma. Of course, in book 1, Rin had a lot of incredibly traumatic experiences. She was experimented on, which she then has to confront again in this book with the Hesperians. She saw a lot of war crimes being committed. She committed war crimes herself. And I kind of loved the way that R.F. Kuang showed her coping with it. Of course, at first it's just her coping with opium and getting addicted to opium. Then after she curbs that addiction, she almost kind of gets addicted to Visera and to getting praised by him. And I really love that dynamic. And I loved how she works through her trauma, but not really. She just always finds different ways to not confront herself, to not confront what she had to do and what she has seen. And she always finds reasons to not confront herself. And I really love that about her. I didn't like her any better because of that, but I appreciated it from a story standpoint. Now, since I already mentioned Visera, he is also a character that I really loved the addition of. I really enjoyed him as a character. However, I did not particularly like that he almost got kind of two-dimensional at the end again. And it kind of plays into my main problem with the series as a whole, that a lot of the evil in this series, a lot of the villains in this series are very two-dimensional, which again I also already mentioned in my spoiler-free review. And it's not really from a standpoint of every person has something good about them or anything like that. I think there's absolutely people that are like Visera, that are like the Muganese in book 1. I mean, they were based on real people, basically. So it's not that I think it's unrealistic, but I just find it uninteresting from a story standpoint. It's history, but history doesn't always translate to the best stories, if you kind of get what I mean. And so that's one of my problems with Visera. He was a very interesting character at the beginning of the book because he was so charismatic and because we saw how Rin was drawn to him. But by the end, he just turned into another one-dimensional villain, although there's not really any good guys in this book, of course. And I just found that really sad, to be honest. And now from Visera, let's move on to his son. I love Nessa. Nessa is one of my favorite characters from book 1, and part of that reason certainly is because I do really enjoy the kind of rivals to allies relationship. It's one of my favorite relationship tropes of all time. But I also love the subversion of expectations, which we get more and more in kind of academy set fantasy nowadays, or sci-fi, where you have this kind of excellent student and your main character kind of thinks it's because they're privileged and everything, and of course that has something to do with it, but it's also just because they're that good, which also is similar in Skyward with Spencer and Jorgen. The thing I didn't love with Nessa in this book though is I absolutely did not like the ending. I found it very interesting, kind of the friendship rivalry and how that developed in this book. I found it interesting how much Neza and Rin repeatedly hurt each other in this book. But I still found that the way Neza then backstabbed her was a little bit out of character, and I did not really see it coming, and so I found it a little bit didn't really like it. Maybe one of the reasons why I had such a big problem with Neza's development, why I didn't really think we saw it coming, is one of my criticisms also from my spoiler-free review, in which I said that this book really could have benefited from multiple POVs. Maybe if we had had even just a few chapters from Neza's point of view, maybe we could have seen more of his inner thoughts and how much he really needs the approval of his father, and maybe then the development of him literally backstabbing Rin wouldn't have been such a surprise. Another thing that I didn't like about Neza is that the reason he even was in this book is because of the worst trope of all time, aka lazy twist, aka resurrection trope, or like bringing someone back from the dead trope, because he wasn't like really dead, but you know. I absolutely hate the trope of, oh, POV character thinks a character is dead, and because of that we as the reader think he's dead, but actually we never saw the body, so of course you can then suddenly reappear that character and, oh well, the character never actually was dead. And that's exactly what happened in this book, and I hate that fantasy authors have been using it more and more and more in books, because at this point I do not trust that a character is dead unless I actually see the body in the book. And yeah, that really annoyed me, even though I'm more fine with it in this book than usual, because again, Neza, at least throughout the first 3/4 of the book, I do still love him, and he's one of the reasons that I actually got through the book, because I did enjoy all scenes with him. Next, I want to talk about the Hesperians. And here my problem again kind of a little bit ties into the whole accurate history does not always make a good story, because the portrayal of the Hesperians is pretty accurate as to like Western colonizers during the main times of colonization, which were of course like 18th and 19th century. And I would know that it's pretty accurate because I study cultural and social anthropology, and a big part of my curriculum is kind of working through the history of colonialism, because of course the discipline kind of has a history with colonialism, because the discipline as a scientific discipline only really exists because of colonialism, so there's a lot to work through there. However, while I found the portrayal of the Hesperians pretty accurate, I still did not like anything about their subplot aside from maybe August, because I really loved that they kind of showed the different mentalities of the colonializers of the colonial people, the colonial powers. And so you had the ones that were very strict and were very upfront of, yeah, you're basically just dirt in our eyes and you will never be on our level, but we're gonna do whatever we want with you. And then you have the ones who are like, but for the better good of their people, we have to help you, and so we gotta come from it from their side as well and have to kind of accept their customs and syncretization and so on. And so while I did find like on an individual level that very interesting, as a whole the subplot didn't really work for me. And the reason for that is that I found the way the Republic dealt with the Hesperians was incredibly stupid, that they didn't tell them to just fuck off. Because yeah, they needed them, kind of, but it was kind of obvious that they would never help them anyway, even though they helped them at the very end. Because like, what type of reasoning is it to be like, yeah, first you kind of have to destroy each other and then maybe if we're convinced, we're going to help you. Because for me, that kind of just seemed like them saying, yeah, destroy each other, and then when you're just at the very bottom, we're going to come in and we're going to take over. And so yeah, I'm just didn't like that and was not a fan of that. Next are two things that I don't necessarily think are negatives, but I do think that R.F. Kuang missed out on like a lot of potential there. The first is Kite, and there again, multiple perspectives, please. There's a reason why so many high fantasy and epic fantasy series have multiple perspectives. But I would have loved to seen Kite's development during the book more, because I think his mentality, especially at the very beginning of the book and when he found out that his father is dead, changed a lot. However, since he is so reserved, we did not see a lot of that because we did not get anything from his perspective. And I would have loved to have had that. It would have been amazing. I believe that. And the second thing is Empress Su Daji. I think we could have played a lot more with kind of the opposition and also the similarities between Rin and Su Daji, because they both made extreme and arguably horrible decisions, but for ultimately, depending on which side you're on, maybe the right reasons. I mean, I don't really think there's ever a right reason for genocide personally, and I also don't really think there's a right reason for just giving up half of your country just so that you can keep the rest and letting your citizens die. But I still think it could have been really interesting. And also I think we could have had a lot more of this thing that I think R.F. Kuang wanted to put in there of there's no really a right side or a wrong side in war a lot of times. We could have had a lot more of that if we had perspectives from the Empress point of view. Because I think the Empress does not see herself as evil, and she's not really power hungry as it is. I think she does care, and I think we could have seen so much more of that if we had had her POV. And it just kind of makes me sad a little bit that I feel there's so many missed opportunities in this book. The last thing I want to say is one specific problem I have with this book. And it's the first time I've seen a scene like this in a book that was written by a female author. And that is a rape scene that isn't actually really there for any specific reason, aside from the fact that the main character then kills a Hesperian. And I don't know, this rape scene just really bothered me. I know it's not as horrible comparatively to a lot of stuff that happened in book one, but I still felt that the reasons for the stuff in book one being there were more well thought out reasons. I actually felt like it added something to the story. However, that rape scene had absolutely no reason to be there. I'm talking about the rape scene at the very end where Rin like kind of comes across a Hesperian raping a girl, and it's just there so she can kill a Hesperian. That's it. That's all there is to it. And that really rubbed me the wrong way, because usually those type of rape scenes are only in books written by male authors and not in books written by female authors. And it kind of leads into this whole discussion of sexualized and gendered violence in fantasy books and how to properly execute gendered violence in books so that it's not just there to just motivate the main character that actually doesn't have anything to directly do with it. So yeah, that's just something that I was really sad about. And I guess I'm gonna end my thoughts on this book with something positive, and that is that I love Venka and I think she's an amazing character and I don't have anything negative to say about her. And that was already it for my discussion on this book. Leave your thoughts on it down below if you agree with me, if you disagree, although I know I'm kind of in the minority of generally not liking the first two books in this series that much, if we want to understate it. And yeah, with that said, if you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out, and I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!